Hello there, it's Lisa Starr with another episode of StarCast. We are digging into some numbers today. So if you're a numbers person, get your pad and pencil out. We are so lucky to be joined by the people who are the architects of the numbers, I'm using quotations if you can't see, that we use throughout the wellness industry. Ophelia Young and Catherine Johnston, both senior research fellows for the Global Wellness Institute. And thank you both for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Thanks, Lisa.
So Ophelia and Catherine were on, I guess it was about a year ago, and we talked about the numbers at that time, but we have new data to share, which came out, I guess, in November at the Global Wellness Summit. This data summarizes wellness, the wellness economy and all its aspects, which is what we'll dig into. What does that mean? And the estimate of the size of that industry right now is 5.6 trillion, that's with a T, dollars in 2022. I mean, these are incredible numbers, and they've done nothing but grow since I think you guys have started counting. Were either of you in on the first SPA report that happened in 2008?
Yes.
Okay, so that's how long this has been going on. So let's jump back to that. I mean, and let's preface it for listeners by saying that as a longtime consultant in the field, when a person who wants to build a spa or wellness center comes to a consultant and says, "Oh, I'd like to put together a business plan. Where do I get the data for the bank?" And we would go, well, there really isn't any data. And people couldn't believe it. They do, especially people who come from other industries. They'd say, well, you must have reports. And it's like, well, actually, we don't. And SPA, particularly then, was not a defined group. It might be part of salon, it might be part of something else. So when that report came out in 2008, it was like, hallelujah. So thank you for that. Can you speak to, how the genesis of this came about, this putting these numbers together?
So yeah, we probably told this story even in your podcast before. Catherine and I, by background, we are economists. So we're not, our background is not in hospitality or spa management. So the genesis is really the Global Wellness Summit, which back in the very first summit in 2007 was the Global Spa Summit, which was founded by Susie at that time. And she wanted this summit to be not just a business conference, but a gathering of leaders in the spa industry, and styled after the World Economic Forum in Davos, high level conversations that benefit everyone in the industry. And at that event, they realized, just as you said, you gather all the leaders in the spa industries all over the world, and people said there's no data. How big is our industry? What is our industry? So they realized the industry really needs some numbers so that they can coalesce around it and they can talk about it, and with people outside the industry and with investors. So they approached SRI International, and Catherine and I we're economists there, that we do a lot of economic development projects. So we work in many different regions and countries and industries. But Catherine and I have also done a lot of work in tourism development. So Susie found SRI because SRI has done a report for the golf industry, for PGA, to measure the size of the golf industry. So Susie thought, well, if they can do golf, maybe they can do spa. So this is how we started on this road. And so it was the conundrum for us. Catherine and I are not spa consumers. We're not spa goers. And so, it's the same question for us. What is a spa? So, for economists, if you don't know what you're talking about, what you cannot really measure that business. So the first task was actually definition. What is a spa? What is counted as a spa? And then we have to go and see if we can find any information on that industry.
And the bigger conundrum is nobody in the spa industry would agree on what a spa is at that point.
That's funny, and you're right. Did it have water? Did it not have water?
Yeah.
There were a lot of definitions.
Exactly. And when we started that work, Susie warned us. She's like, "Oh, you're going to have to be careful because those Europeans, they say it has to have water, and elsewhere they say it has to have a certain number of offerings." And so, it actually made a difference that we were coming from outside the industry with an outside perspective, because it allowed us to sort of rise above those little, petty definitional fighting, and look at it from a sort of a consumer perspective. And we intentionally at that time adopted what we called a very inclusive definition, because if a consumer is going to a place for certain types of activities and feels that they're going to a spa, we feel that that's a valid, that's valid. It's not, the consumer doesn't care what their business defines them, to be. So, the definition we laid out then was very inclusive, and we've kept it that way throughout the work that we've done.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and I think you're right, Catherine, your point that you guys were not from the industry. So you didn't come in with all of those sort of ideas about how it's done. And we really probably needed that. So 2008, we get the SPA numbers, and we're all just thrilled that there was, a beginning of a defining of the size of our industry. And Ophelia, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't it end up that we were already bigger than golf at that time?
I think much bigger than golf. Yeah. Although we never did a global golf study. We did a US study of golf. So, it would be very hard to measure this global golf industry, but, I'm sure somebody can go and do it.
Well, I'm sure I know there's golf is big in other parts of the world, but it's pretty big in the US. So I think you have a good sense of it from that. So flash forward to today, 2024, unbelievable. And our 2023 data is much more robust and broad than it was, because wellness has evolved so much. And we'll talk a bit about that. I like your definition, and I want to share it now. What is a wellness economy? What counts as that? Well, it's defined by GWI as industries that enable consumers to incorporate wellness activities and lifestyles into their daily lives. Well, that's a lot of things, right? So we've gone very far from just spa. Can you, either of you, speak to any of the 11 sectors that are now included in this data?
Sure, I can do that. So, the way this progressed since we started with the spa data is, as the Global Spa Summit turned into the Global Wellness Summit, and that group and the organization really expanded and evolved, and the stakeholders became more broad, there was really a recognition that the future for all of them was in this broader concept of wellness. So starting around 2010, our research really evolved to looking at wellness first within the context of spa and hospitality, but then it became more and more broad over all of the years since then. So what we've done is, from around 2010 to 2015, we started adding sectors. We looked at thermal mineral springs, then we defined and looked at wellness tourism, kind of starting in that hospitality space, but then broadening out from there. We did the first spa economy study. I think the data was for 2013, 10 years ago. So that was the first time we put together that definition, Lisa, that you just, read out, of the wellness economy, and then we defined the sectors that are in it. At that time, we had 10 sectors. We've added one more now. It's 11. So, and the sectors
you had 10 sectors, but you didn't analyze them all, right? You only did data on maybe 5 of them.
Yeah. So the way it worked is the sectors where we have done deep dive research, like the spa industry, like thermal and mineral springs, wellness tourism, where we've put all the work in to create a definition, to figuring out a methodology of how to come up with the numbers, and then actually doing the work to measure it country by country. Those are the sectors where we did really detailed numbers. For the other sectors, we've added those over time, but for the other sectors, what we've done is we do come up with a number ourselves, but it was a very high level global estimate. So in 2013, we had 3 sectors where we had detailed numbers, and the rest were high level estimates. And over the years, we've done more and more deep dive studies into different sectors and expanded our data collection at the very detailed level in those. So at this point, we are actually producing global data ourselves for all 11 sectors for 200 countries. So you can imagine the immense, work that goes into that. And some of it requires much more work on our part to gather the numbers than others, because for some sectors there's literally no data that we can draw upon. We have to create it ourselves, like spa, like thermal springs. For other sectors like personal care and beauty and healthy eating, we do have some very good data sources that we can draw on and work with to make the estimates that we need. So the numbers work varies by sector. So actually, one new thing that we started 2 years ago is we have created what we call our country rankings report. And, everyone's familiar with the Global Wellness Economy Monitor. That's the one we put out at the summit. It has the bubble chart in it. And we talk about all of the sectors. But what that report doesn't do is it doesn't talk about the countries. So we thought, well, we really have to put that in a different report. So now we have 2 reports with the data. The country rankings report, it looks at what are the top 25, countries in the world in terms of the size of the wellness market. We drill down to it in different ways, like looking on a per capita basis. What is wellness as a share of the economy in each country? And we do all kinds of different analyses around that. So we have a new country rankings report that's coming out. It's going to be released next week, as of when we're recording this. We have a big press event.
Last week of January, right?
Yeah, last week of January. It's a press event for GWS and GWI. And so that will come out, and it's a companion data report to the monitor that came out in the fall. We also have been putting out country level data through GWI through an initiative we call Geography of Wellness. We have a new kind of microsite within GWI, and the way that works is we have partners in different countries who sponsor putting out very detailed data for their country. And we have about 8 or so countries on that page right now. And, when we have a country that gets a partnership and a sponsorship, we can actually put out a specific report for that country. So for example, there's one for the United States, and there's a web page, and it has the high level numbers. And then we have a downloadable report that has all of the sectors and the subsectors just for the United States.
Wow, that's really valuable.
Yeah.
That would be,
so it's a lot more, yeah.
That will be launched on a Tuesday, on US data.
So Geography of Wellness is open to all countries, as I understand it. And any country can ask you, they have to pay, but they get attached to that data, which is for public use for a year. And it's not a huge investment, and it's a fabulous opportunity. First of all, to make the country seem like they're very forward thinking about wellness and attracting development, and also just for the use of citizens within that country. It's a really useful tool. Thank you so much for doing that. Walk through what the sectors are for listeners. It's nice to see the graph, but for anyone listening, there are 11 sectors now currently. Yes.
Yeah. I have it in front of me because I always afraid I'm going to forget something. I'll tell you by size. So
starting with the largest.
Yeah. So the largest is personal care and beauty. And then after that, we have healthy eating, nutrition, and weight loss. Then we have physical activity. And then the next sector is wellness tourism. Then we have public health, prevention, and personalized medicine. Next is traditional and complementary medicine. Then we have wellness real estate, mental wellness, which was the new sector we added a couple of years ago. Then spas, then workplace wellness, and then thermal mineral springs.
Wow, so many. And that adds up to 5.6 trillion for 2022.
Yes.
Yes.
So personal care and beauty, as long as I've been looking at these numbers, has always been the biggest bubble. And that includes products that we use on ourselves personally, right? Beauty products.
And
does it
personal care
include
products? Yeah.
personal care, like deodorant? Does it include going to the hair salon?
Yes. It's, anything we do to take care of ourselves.
To beautify ourselves.
Brushing our teeth, soap, deodorant, all of those products that we use.
Well, no surprise, it was the biggest bubble then.
Yeah.
So some of these have come online. I'm thinking about workplace wellness was not a thing 10 years ago, nor was wellness real estate. Mental wellness, as you said, is fairly new. And then some of them have changed their shape over time. So let's talk a little bit about that, what you two have had a unique view on how this has all evolved. I mean, healthy eating, that wasn't even a category, right? We used to call it nutrition, I suppose.
Yeah, there have been a lot of changes in the sectors. I mean, the sectors have stayed the same in terms of what's in there, but sometimes the boundaries of them or the names have changed or how we measure them because they do evolve. And also our ability to measure things changes. So just as an example, one big shift that we made was that physical activity bubble.
Right.
When we first started using that one 10 years ago, it was fitness. I think we called it fitness and mind body because, you know, all along people have always thought about fitness and gyms as obviously being part of wellness, right? Well, we did a deep dive study on that sector in 2019, I think. And when we did that work, you know, we probably spent 4 months just hashing out the definition of that bubble once we were going to do the deep dive research and, you know, figuring out what's in and what's out. And the conclusion we came to is, well, you know, it can't just be fitness, because if we're talking about, you know, getting physical activity for wellness purposes and for health purposes, you don't have to go to the gym to do that. You know, we can do sports, we can go running outside, we can take walks, you know, there's all of these things that we can be doing for physical activity. And we decided that that bubble needed to expand and change name and change shape to encompass all of those, because that really fits the holistic approach to wellness, the definition that we use.
Yeah, like physical activity, when you think, you know, like for example, sports and dance and martial arts, you know, it's very, maybe some fitness studio have some of those, but they're distinct industry, distinct businesses in those sectors, right? People running a martial arts studio, dance studio. So when we start looking into, you know, including sports, we have to keep our definition very, very clear. We're not talking about spectator sports, because when sports industry look at how big they are, they're actually looking at, you know, spectator sports like stadium and, you know, what kind of economic
impact to watch someone play a soccer game. Or
yeah.
Yes. So we have to be very clear what we include, what we don't, because even those terms like sports as an industry they have their own definition. So we have to say, we don't even want to include like people training for a professional, you know, a competition, like those children, you know, going to Florida to train. We don't want to include those as part of this industry, because to us, that's not wellness and people doing physical activity for their health, right? So we have to be really clear in our minds, even when we start wading into this, like dance. Well, we're not going into like the professional dance troops, right? And that is an industry. Dance is an industry. So for each one of this, as we include it, we have to keep, you know, be very clear. Like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? And we had to go back to physical activity. Any kind of physical activity is good for your health. So, you know, we got to stick with physical activity and not start getting into all these other economic, you know, data on it. So that's a sort of process we go through when we come up with numbers.
I remember when that bubble was introduced, I think, wasn't it when we were in Singapore, whenever that was, maybe 2019, and it was like, oh, that's smart. It's not just fitness, because you're right. We don't just go to the gym for fitness. And now, even more than ever, we do it everywhere. There's so many little boutique fitness and wellness places where you can exercise, franchises. As you've noted in your report, there's many things that we do that aren't necessarily monetized, like walking outside or doing rock climbing, but maybe I buy the equipment for the rock climbing, but I don't have to pay, you know, so that's a lot to figure out. I'm not sure how you did that.
Yeah, I also want to, when you talk about how some of these have changed over time, we created the bubble for workplace wellness, I think in 2015. That's when we launched that. And of course, people tend to think about workplace wellness as workplace wellness programs. And there's a big industry of that. And the wellness services, you know, fitness and spa, some of them are part of it, because employers might give these benefits through a workplace wellness programs to their employees. But, you know, since even before the pandemic, but increasingly, you can see like people, you know, when they think about wellness in relation to their work and how employers may help to support that, it is no longer workplace wellness programs. It is flexible schedule, flexibility in how you do your work, and maybe rearranging how work is done so people feel more autonomy. And there are many things that now employers are slowly learning that it's related to employees' mental wellness. Mental wellness is really big in workplace, right? So it becomes increasingly hard for us to find those numbers and measure it, because if the employer decides to raise wages, that's not part of a workplace wellness budget, right? That is just across the board. That's how they do business. So that sector has not grown that much recently, but it doesn't mean that the spending or the care that maybe employers put in workplace wellness is declining.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I wondered if this was a segue into us talking about COVID and the effects of COVID on all of these silos. I mean, do you think that that workplace wellness sort of flattening is maybe because people are not going to the office so much?
That number, well, Catherine can tell you more. That it flattened, well, it declined in 2020 because a lot of people cannot do those programs especially when they're based in the office. And also there is a trend since before the pandemic of people being freelancers, and people who are independent contractors, freelancers, and all over the world, the gig workers. They're not employees, and they usually don't benefit from any employer initiatives to improve their well-being. So all around the world, we are seeing a higher percentage of people being gig workers or working in the sort of non-formal economy. This is like a global trend everywhere, right? So when you look at, like, when we keep thinking of maybe the JP Morgan and Apple, when we think about it, we think of these campuses and these wealthy companies, like giving benefits to their knowledge workers. But the majority of the workforce in the world, they're not. I mean, they're in low pay services, they're in gig things, or manufacturing workers. So when we look at those numbers, it's like a very big global number that we're starting from actually how many people are employed and how many people are employed in the formal economy. And then from there thinking, doing our estimate on what's the percent of the employers that even offer anything and what would they spend. So it's a lot of data to wade through before we come up with an estimate.
So let's talk a little bit about the spa bubble in particular. I mean, all of the wellness industries are of interest to the wellness people and people listening to the podcast, but I wanted to spend a moment on spas in particular because it was the genesis of how the report began and how it has changed and evolved. It's still one of the smaller bubbles. It's the third to the bottom in size in terms of these 11 sectors. And yet, if I think back correctly, I think this market currently priced as you have it at 105 billion is probably double the size it was when we first started measuring in 2008. I'm sure some of that is a factor of economy, and some may be in what was measured. So can we talk a little bit about how you decide what's a spa and what type of spa a facility is?
Yeah, I can give you the background on that. And the interesting thing is the methodology we established in 2008 for measuring the spa sector, which is has a lot of stuff underneath it. Honestly, that has not changed that much over this, since then. It's done at a very granular level. We're very rigorous with that sector. It probably has the most work put into it of any of the sectors, even though it's one of the smallest. But we're still using the same spreadsheets and all the same numbers we started with back then, and we've gotten a little better at it over time. But it's a very nitty-gritty process, I'll say. So the way that works is, underneath spa, we have different categories of spas. We have hotels and resort spas. We have day and club spas, medical spas. There's a whole set of subcategories.
Destination spas.
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
and then there's that other category. We have thermal and
Right.
mineral spring spas. So within each of those subcategories, we use an entirely different data collection process and methodology to put together the numbers. So, you take those, 6 subsectors, and then you go by 200 countries. So you can imagine the number of data points we're feeding into those. So,
Spectacular is what I can imagine.
yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
when we have to say that in the US, the iSpa is the source of a lot of our information, although I think we are a little bit more inclusive. So our number is always a little bit bigger than iSpas, but we use their data, and there are not that many countries that have the US kind of the granular data. Japan has some, but the iSpa use the same, I think, very similar categories. So, but we're dealing with more than 200 countries, and how do you go to countries like that have hammams, and what is that? Or if there is like onsen, and then they offer some other body work service, do we include that? So it's really like taking those categories and then try to apply it to the whole world. It's challenging for us, but that's
It's
how we're.
always been a challenge to me, both as a consultant and an educator and a journalist. Like when you're looking for data, we can often find data on the US market in some aspect, but the rest of the world, not so much. We have good numbers and other countries don't track things so well. So I guess you do a lot of extrapolation or supposition. I mean, how do you do it as an economist? What are the kind of the guidelines for figuring that out?
Yeah, it's a tricky process. And, again, for each category, we're doing it differently. And we do the type of data collection we have to do to come up with the quote best guess estimate that we can do in every single spa category across every country. So just to give you an example, the destination spas category, that category, we literally count them. We have a database that we've been compiling since 2008 for every country, from just, people we know in the industry, from extensive web research. We follow the spa media publications, and when there are new openings, we track those. So, literally that's a process of every time we update the numbers, we have to go around and figure out, are there new ones? And we add them to our list and we count them up. So that's one segment. Thermal and mineral spring spas is very similar to that. That entire data set, which is separate from spa but overlaps because they're springs, and then there are springs with spas. That is another data set that we put together by counting them. I started that database in, I think, 2011. And I have every country in the world that has springs, and we have a list of the businesses, and we watch for new openings. And, sometimes we get better information from certain countries, and, it's not necessarily we grow them because we find out there are things we didn't know existed before, because it's really hard to figure out, what are all the places in Brazil when you don't speak Portuguese.
Exactly.
We've gotten really good at doing research in foreign languages. So that's one methodology for certain categories. For other categories like hotel and resort spas, you can't count those. There are too many. Well, in most countries, there are too many. So we kind of have a hybrid process for that. And we use, there are all kinds of online travel booking search engines, right, that people use. The biggest global one is booking.com. So that's our primary source of information for that, where we go country by country every time we do the data and run filters and figure out how many are in there with, hotels and resorts that have spas or spa-like services. For the big countries, it's more of an estimate based on bookings.com. For small countries, again, we do count them because for small countries and developing countries, the search engine is not always the best approach, because there are a lot of properties that don't list themselves. They're not marketing to international tourists, they're marketing to locals.
And they don't want to share their revenue either.
Yeah, I mean, they probably can't afford to list themselves. So this hotel and resorts is a combination of counting them for some countries and then using the bookings engines for making estimates for others. The day and club spa category is also more of an estimation process, where we have some numbers, that we've collected over time, actual numbers from different countries. And then we have, kind of an econometric estimation process that we have to do for that, where, certain countries with a certain income level and a certain size of population and certain characteristics of the market would typically have a certain number of day and club spas, like per say 10,000 people.
Mhm.
And so we come up with parameters then to make estimates for other countries. I mean, honestly, that's one of the hardest ones to estimate.
Yeah.
I would think so, because there are so many, you know, as you said, I mean, we're talking about a total number of what, 180,000 that you guys estimated? This is just spas globally. And then if you get the report, which by the way, we'll repeat it at the end, but if you go to globalwellnessinstitute.org, you can click on research and there will be the monitor. You have to give your personal information, and is there a fee to get it?
No, it is free. This is all
Free.
available to
I
the
mean,
public.
it's amazing because it's what, 100 pages and excellent information and data tables. And I mean, I use it, if not weekly, almost daily. So there's a lot more data in there, but it's really good to look at how it breaks down. I was interested that the hotel spa number this year superseded the day spa number. Usually in the US, we're well outweighed with day spa to hotel, but globally, spas are in hotels in most other countries. And so that is also reflected in your number. I think it's interesting the way it has grown, and how much of the top 5 countries own that market, which were United States, Germany, France, China, Japan. Top 5 are almost half of the global spa revenue. So plenty of room for growth in the other countries. That's what I always look at when I look at the number. I think, well, okay, there's a lot of room for us to grow and catch up to these other wellness sectors, right?
Yes. I always think of spa as the small but mighty sector within the wellness industry, because the size of the spa industry is really, I think, it's kind of underestimates its importance. A lot of the new and emerging wellness modalities are introduced to consumers at spas, whether they're in their home country or when they're traveling. A lot of time when they're traveling. So there's, even though the industry looks small compared to the other ones, it is very, very influential.
It's a really great point you make, Ophelia, especially when you look at destination or hotel spas, like say you're at a nice resort in Italy and you take a yoga class and you never took one. And then you say, oh, that yoga, that's pretty nice. I'm going to do that. And you go home and now it's in the physical activity bubble, but you learned it in the spa bubble. And I'm sure there's a lot of other crossover like that between silos and between countries.
Yeah, pretty
absolutely.
much, right? Yeah, like spas, and especially destination spas, they introduce physical activity modalities. They introduce
meditation, sound healing. I mean, there's so many things people will
healthy
do.
eating, right? Like, yeah. So and a complementary medicine, modalities. A lot of people, they try
acupuncture
for the first time at a destination spa.
Yeah.
Well, I'm thinking about Zulal, who introduced PAIM to the world, traditional Arab and Islamic medicine. And now, I mean, that was a thing in those countries, but most of your Western guests did not know that. So now they will. Who knows what the fallout from that will be. Let's talk for a moment about COVID. This was one of the sectors that was hardest hit in COVID, with a contraction of about 40%, if I'm correct in my number, and the size of the revenue. Obviously, places you had to be in person, you couldn't be there, and that was a natural result. But it looks like, when I look at the latest data, that every sector has more than recovered from 2019, which was our bellwether year, right? I mean, that was the year we were hitting amazing revenues, and spa's no different. What can you say about how that all happened? Would we have continued on, or did COVID make consumers more aware of their importance they have to be healthy? And did it send more people our way? What are your thoughts as economists and researchers?
I mean, COVID, the spa, springs, and wellness tourism are the three, physical activity too. They're the sectors that really got hammered because people, you need to go there to right, get the service. And so, with the shutdown, and then people are not traveling, the tourism industry just kind of got shut down for a while at that. So these sectors just took the brunt of it. But there's no question that COVID has really reoriented all global consumers toward wellness. And people are made aware of many more things, of how they eat or exercise and sleep and stress, and all these things are, you ask, I think, in any consumer surveys you do in the world, even in middle income countries, wellness or health is like one of the highest priority for them. So spas they're definitely the beneficiary of it. But I think at the same time we have the labor issue, which is, I think it's like a big risk and a big constraint right now. And spa is not the only one. The whole global hospitality sector, and even in fitness, all over the world. So there's almost more demand than can be delivered. And of course, that with the labor shortage, we're talking higher costs, right? So you know well that it's like a very, very big issue for all the hospitality industry.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, something else though, sort of unpack underneath those numbers with how the revenue has come back since the COVID dip is is it more people going to a spa, or is it fewer people going and spending more? I mean, we do know from the the good US data we have from iSpa and from some other places that have numbers that in the spa industry, at least, the number of visits is not back to where it was pre-COVID, even when sometimes the revenues have recovered or come back because we have inflation, we have price increases. So I think there's definitely been a shift a little bit in sort of the visit to spend ratio, in the industry. But there's no question that the demand is there. It's the numbers that we have right now in the report that we're talking about are through 2022. And we move on so fast. We have to remember in 2022 there was still a lot of shutdowns.
There was still
a lot of Asia was not traveling for all of 2022. So in that particular year, the spa industry globally was not back, was not recovered. We do some projections. We project that it's I think last year, as of 2023, it will be back. But we think we're beyond the pandemic, but it's really just been in the last, 6 to 12 months that where things are more normal.
When it first happened, when we first were in the pandemic, we all spent so much time on webinars every week, right, together. And I was watching hospitality webinars, and some of the experts were saying immediately that it would be 5 years before we were out of that. And I was thinking, they're crazy. Of course, I wanted them to be crazy, but also, like, how could it be? But it seems that, that wasn't far wrong. I mean, we feel pretty free of it for 2024, but we're not completely out of the woods. And great point, Ophelia, about the labor. I think that fitness in particular has struggled to get back to their level because of the difficulty of labor. We are having the same in spa and wellness. I will say, from being in the field, it has lightened a little bit. We are still very pressed to find massage therapists or nail technicians if you're hiring them. But it has become easier to find estheticians, and we are seeing massage therapists come back who maybe went out and did their own thing and were private contractors and got tired of schlepping their table around in their car, and they come back to the spa. Finding people to work at the desk, still a challenge. So it actually leads me to my next question, building on the spa data, which is how spas are evolving and touchless wellness. This year I was a judge on the inaugural Touchless Wellness Awards, right? And now we're having LED and cryotherapy and halotherapy and compression therapy, and which aren't all completely touchless, by the way. But the idea being there are treatments a person can enjoy in a spa setting that don't require a licensed or certified person to deliver them. And we are starting to see that really proliferate. I know you gave excellent notes in your data on spa that those things were not included because they're from another sector. Would you like to speak to that and how you see that evolving in the future?
Yeah. So just to be clear on what's included and what's not included, anything that is offered in a spa, that spa business offers, that's absolutely counted in the numbers.
Okay.
So, the interesting thing for us as economists is when we do these measurements, there are different ways to measure them. And the spa sector, we are measuring on a business revenue basis. So, how many spas are there? How many day spas, times how much revenue those spas earn from whatever they may be offering. But the challenge with that type of measurement is that, as you say, and as we know, the spa industry is evolving, the types of offerings are evolving, and there are a lot of new business models out there that are offering those types of services that compete with spas and overlap with spas that we wouldn't call a spa. There are many places we can get a massage that's not a spa, right? So if we were measuring, massage, we might have a completely different number, because you can get a massage at a spa, you can get a massage at your doctor's office, you can go to the physical therapist. I mean, so many places you can get a massage, right?
The ones we won't mention, right?
Yeah, and we have the salt caves and all of these, new establishments that really are not spas, but are offering, wellness services,
treatments, right?
things. Yeah, so it becomes, again, it's a small bubble, but that just speaks back to what Ophelia said, that it has a huge amount of impact and influence in terms of the things that proliferate outside of it, that are growing, that are not even necessarily measured in that number.
I mean, the touchless technology, it is still a small minority of the spas when you look at a big number. And I mean, they're like, you think about the massage in the mall, they could, right? And those massage chairs. And so they could be competing with spas too, right? But it's in a different sort of like a price point. So in our spa number, we're not looking at the equipment sale, the touchless equipment sale. That's not what we measure. So like Catherine said, that's a little challenging sometimes, because we're looking at still the establishments that we would identify as spas, but there are all these sort of, adjacent and competing business models that are proliferating, and then we're not capturing them. It's not that important in the big number, because it will be a very small part of it. But if you're operating a business, that will have an impact, right? And consumers are maybe buying them. Rich people can have their own, their whole spa set up at home, right? The sauna, and then they can have the massage. Right there, all the touchless technology, just like people used to just have massage chairs, right? You can have your $20,000 chair at home.
And they're still selling them at the Consumer Electronics Show. I saw them in Vegas. All these, they look like spaceships, and you can have it in your home. And how effective it is, who knows? But if you have that kind of money, you don't care, right? And you'll still get your regular massage. Yes, and the models we're seeing evolve are going to be outside the definitions we currently have. I mean, we see yoga studios with juice bars, and we see fitness centers that have massage and mindfulness. And so, they're all starting to cross-pollinate, and it's great, but it's also, hard to measure. So let's talk about the future. I mean, you guys have seen front row seats on how this data has evolved to this point. And what do you think you see in the next 5 or 10 years? I know that you did make a projection that the healthy eating bubble would surpass personal care and beauty in 2025. And I was amazed by that, because it has never been there. And, so let's speak to that, and what other changes you envision in the next 5 or 10 years.
I think it's in our projection, there are some sectors that we think will grow very fast, right? Like you said, the healthy eating. And another one that we think will continue to grow, and we're just in the beginning of the trend, is definitely wellness real estate. Because COVID, that brought our attention to indoor air, right? And that disease can be transmitted in your built environment. COVID also makes us realize that, there are some people who have access to space or healthy things to do, even when they're kind of, in isolation, if they live in certain places or neighborhood. And then it is really not equally distributed, within our country and around the world. It's like sort of the access to being able to see green space, or just being able to take a walk in a safe place. And so wellness real estate is really, a sector where you, on the luxury end, you can see people are interested in the not only the amenities, but a lot of the new technologies and the different way that you can take care of your mental wellness, not just physical wellness. But it is also starting to go into the more, middle income and even public policy in the subsidized, low income housing space. So that we're definitely that sector, we're going to see much more growth and a mainstream acceptance.
Thanks for having the Wellness Real Estate Symposium. I guess the second one is in New York in May, and it's amazing. I went to it, and I just didn't know companies were doing all these things and building smart, and the materials and the sustainability and the walkability, and forcing consumers to make smart decisions or choices, giving them the option to take the stairs. I mean, all of these things are just fascinating.
Yes. So that is a sector that we spend a lot of time defining, and we had our first report which we released in 2018 when we defined the sector and measured it. So we are in the beginning process of working on a refresh of that report, because there's just so much that has happened, and a lot of it is now also intersect with hospitality. As you know, a lot of just the hotel brands, the highest end ones, they already have their branded residences. And I would say that most of them are now rebranding them as, luxury wellness residences. So there's almost no luxury residence that will be marketed without a wellness component. Whether they have a spa in there or not, it remains to be seen. But we see even organizations like the Blue Zone getting into that. So it's a space to watch, definitely, where this
if you're a developer, I hope you're listening. You have to have wellness. Catherine, what are your observations?
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing with the projections, I mean, if we go backwards, we have 10 years worth of data now, and the spa industry, I mean, not the spa industry, the wellness industry, all the sectors have kind of been like this, like up, through that whole time, with the exception of during the pandemic. And for the most part, if we just kind of look at a very macro level and a global level, the projections continue that way for the next 5 years, high growth, some sectors growing more than others. But, I think that, again, coming from an economist perspective, there are a few things, sort of cautions we might put on that, or things that we might be looking out for in terms of, what could affect that? What might make it go down? Why would some sectors be growing really fast and others not so much? There are certain parts of the wellness industry, spas, tourism, there are offerings that have increasingly have come from a very sort of luxury market perspective, and in some ways, since the pandemic, have gone even more in that direction. So, we see a lot of spending growth, but is that spending growth, again, we ask as economists, is that more people going to spas, or is that the same people going to spas more often and spending more money?
Right.
Is it, businesses that are really pushing to the higher end, offering, very pricey offerings and trying to make a lot of revenue that way? So if we think about it in those terms, I think those sort of choices in the industry and, the types of offerings that are out there, the range of price points, all of that is going to affect the growth of those sectors going forward. Maybe not in 5 years, but we look out 10, 15, are they all chasing the same customers and cannibalizing each other, or are they actually expanding their access to new parts of the market and new populations that are not spa goers right now? So, I think over the long term, those are questions that are really going to shape some of the growth in that sector. Other parts of the industry, if we look at some of the really big segments like personal care and beauty, I mean, honestly, it's already so big. Again, we all spend what we spend on those products, right? So I mean, any company can try to cannibalize, well, you buy this shampoo, not that shampoo.
Right.
That's a segment that very much is driven by consumer spending, which is driven by the economy. When inflation is high and we all feel poor, we buy less. When we're feeling good and the economy's flourishing, we may buy more pricey things. So, those are some of the factors that drive those purchases. Again, wellness real estate, I would say, probably has, in my mind, the biggest upward potential right now, because the need is so great and the impact is so great, and the opportunity is it's there, and it's still at the very beginning. So, each sector kind of has its own
Mm-hmm.
trajectory when we're looking out to the future, if that makes sense.
Well, for sure. That's an excellent answer. I mean, you've got 12% category growth in here for the 2 years from 2020 to 2022. That's immense growth in the kind of economy that we're having. And we can't expect that to keep repeating every 2 years for the next 10 years. As you say, some things will flatten and there will be cannibalization from one to the other.
Yeah. And actually, the last 2 years of growth is probably not the best benchmark for everyone to have in their mind, is like, oh, wow, we got to keep that up, because that is pandemic recovery. When we dip in 2020, we got to grow faster to get out of it and get back to where we were. So the rates have been, I would say, kind of artificially high over the last 2 years because of that. And so I think from 23 forward, we're going to see more of sort of a normal level of growth that's not recovery,
I can say that as a consultant, we have been looking with client work at numbers today compared to 2019. We don't look at them compared to 2020 or 2021 because they're just not as relevant. So thank you for making that point. But yet, bullish on the wellness real estate. Do you see a certain part of the world, like a certain continent or country, being more prone to this, where we should be putting our investing money?
Well, I mean, the growth in the past and right now is still very much US dominated. Part of that is because the US has had some of the most unhealthy building and development patterns of any place in the world. So we have a lot of stuff to fix, and we have a lot of problems that we have to compensate for, which is why there's so much demand and interest in the US market for that. But at the same time, I mean, we see these projects happening all over the world, and especially in, some of the larger, sort of mega cities in Asia, UK and different parts of the world. There are a lot of aspects to that industry that, the building is happening in the US. It's anywhere from, the biggest luxury condos in cities to suburban developments to co-housing to affordable housing. It's kind of at all ends of the market that, things are happening. But again, it's very small what's happening now relative to the need. So,
right. Sure.
Yeah. We're definitely going to, until now we can see a lot of overlap with the hospitality sector, and people may be interested in, their second home, third home, right? But I think going forward, we're going to see more senior housing, because it's just aging. It's population aging is a thing, that it's like looming. And if we all live longer, we're all going to, want to make sure we live in a healthy way and functional, and not everyone can age in place in their current home. And people are really looking into, how you can live in a way that it will enable you to just have a healthy lifestyle and have the social interaction that's going to be healthy for you, for your social and mental wellness. So there is going to be a lot more innovation and a lot more products and people looking into that space all over the world.
I mean, I'm thinking of what the Blue Zones does, the study of the people that live the longest, and they're not in fancy luxury condos, right? They're in small towns and villages where they grow their vegetables and they have a community and they walk and they're outside and they move their bodies. And that's the secret in the end. But not everyone has access to that. And so when you're listening to this podcast and you're a business developer or owner, you have to think about, well, how am I imparting wellness, to the people who need it from me? And what is our ability to scale that? It does seem, like the opportunity is endless at the moment. And I'm sure it's not endless, but I'm sure happy that you two and your team, these are two of a team of 4, are tracking this data. It's so important for all of us.
Thanks. Well, we're glad that people are using them.
Very much so. So thanks again, Senior Research Fellows, Ophelia Young and Catherine Johnston, representing the Global Wellness Institute. Again, if you'd like to read the report we've been referencing, you go to globalwellnessinstitute.org and click on research. It's right there for you. And, thank goodness these ladies and their team are working hard to give us this data. It's so important. And thanks for taking the time to join me today.
Yeah.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you.